Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Steve Down. This is my guitar. If you're just joining us, this is the final episode in our study of Jim Hall's All the Things You Are from the album 3. This has been a pretty big journey through this one. It's a pretty hefty piece, and we've looked all the way through the head. We've gone through the 2 choruses of his solo. We've taken a little bit of a look at his comping under the bass solo, and then we've also looked at the trading that he does as well. And then today we're going to finish off by looking at the final head. Before we jump into the head, I just want to say a big thanks to the patrons. There's been loads of you that signed up since the last episode, which is great. So I'm just going to read your names out. Thanks to Dirk, John, Louis, Marianne, Zach, Andre, Alexis, Will, Mark, Gareth, Simon, Brad, and Alessandro. Really, really big thanks to you guys. There's loads of you. So yeah, thanks for following along in this, if it was this particular series that made you sign up. Thanks for following along, or thanks for any of the other series that you've been watching as well. If you want to support me, the link to the Patreon is here, as well as the full transcription to the tune that we're looking at. You'll also get the backing track and all of the exercises that you see on screen, and you'll have access to all of the previous series as well. If you want to support in a one-off fashion, then there's a link to find me a coffee below. And as always, I really appreciate you liking and subscribing and hitting the bell to see the next one. Okay, so let's just jump straight in to the head. So here's the first 8 bars. Okay, so there's not a huge amount that we need to discuss about this head because it's very similar to the first head, which is in the first episode. But there's a couple of things that I want to draw on today. And the first thing here is his use of legato and chromaticism in approach to the head itself, in approach to the melody. And this is a really good way of varying how you play the melody. This is how he played the melody the first time. And then here, he's using far more legato, so he's drawing all of the notes together. So he's starting, the melody obviously is, and here what he's doing is, so he's going down through all of the notes, all the chromatic notes to join A flat down through to F, and then going to here. And he does a similar thing. So he goes all the way from D flat down through B flat, A flat, down to G. So he's drawing it all together, making it nice and smooth. It's almost the way that a sax player might do it. Obviously, he continues on. Now, this is quite tricky because you obviously run out of fingers. You haven't got enough fingers to get from fret 8 all the way down to 3. So what he actually does is he does a pull off all the way down through to 5 from 8, and then slides down through to the 3rd fret to F. So B flat, down through to G, and then slide down to F. And then he keeps it fairly simple for the rest of it. And then quirky little thing that he does at the top, which I just think sometimes we over-theorize things that jazz musicians do, and I think we neglect sometimes that they might just play something because it sounds cool, not because it fits into this theoretical concept or this harmonic concept. As we get into the next 8 bars, Jim actually doesn't carry on this really cool chromatic legato approach. So what I've done is I've actually put together a version of what I imagine he might have done had he continued on that idea through the next 8 bars. So here's that. Okay, let's take a look at the next 8 bars. So we've got a little bit of legato at the start. He kind of slides all the way from 1st fret up to 6th. I use my 1st finger for that. And then a little bit of tiny bit more legato, but it's not as chromatic as the first 8 bars. And there's a really cool thing that he does here where he jumps up an octave into the next range, because obviously as he gets down here, he's kind of running out of notes and it's getting a little bit too low and a little bit too nearer the range of the bass. So he actually jumps it up. So So he's taking it up in the range to make sure that he doesn't run out of frets or that he doesn't stray into the frequency range of the bass. Now this next bit that he plays over the top of the 2-5-1 into G is really interesting. He's playing a chord which is known as a dominant 13 flat 9, which is a chord that is associated with the diminished half whole scale. And that scale is this. And the chord that is drawn out of that is the dominant 13 flat 9. And he arpeggiates it here. And that is a really cool way. It's a D13 flat 9. It's a really cool way of creating a nice altered approach to G major 7. As you'll notice, again, we've been talking about this in all the past episodes as well. Sometimes when you've got these fast-paced 2-5-1s where you've got the 2 and the 5 squeezed into one bar, he'll ignore the 2, okay? And that's purely because he doesn't want it to sound too exercise-like or to crowd the melody. And so here he focuses just on the dominant chord, which is the D, and he's playing a D13 flat 9. Okay, but he starts on the C, and it's very easy to kind of see this as a B with a C in the bass, but it is definitely a D13 flat 9. We've got the flat 7 here, which is the C. We've got the major third, which is the F sharp. We've got the 13th, which is the B, and then the E flat, which is the flat 9. We don't always need the tonic, remember, for the chord to actually still be a D13 flat 9. The most important notes that are in there are the 3rd, the 7th, and then any extensions. So just in case you want to try this approach yourself, here's some more voicings for that same chord. Okay, let's take a look at the next 8 bars. So this is over the B section where we've got a 2-5-1 into G, if we remember, and then also a kind of faux minor 2-5-1 that actually ends on majors. So we've got the F sharp half diminished chord going into B7, which is quite often altered, and then ending on an E major rather than an E minor, which is what you would expect if you were starting the sequence on a half diminished F sharp. So we've got the approach. Now he's approaching this in a very similar way in which he approached it in the original head. However, here, instead of it being with the D there, he's actually got an E flat here. And this would suggest that, again, he's ignoring that 2 chord because that's the same notes that we had earlier, or similar notes, to the D13 flat 9. You've got the C, which is the flat 7, the E flat, which is the flat 9, the B, which is the 13, and then the D, which is the tonic. So it's really clever that he's drawing on his approach from the beginning, but changing it by 1 note to kind of change the focus of the harmony from being the 2 chord to the 5 chord. And then we've got some nice fourthsy bits where he's approaching from a semitone above. So he's approaching that G major sound with fourths. And then he's got an approach which is similar, approaching from a semitone above, sliding down into a fourthsy approach over the top of the F sharp, not necessarily covering all of the F sharp minor 7 flat 5, but it's just a nice fourthsy approach. Remember again that, you know, the theoretical concepts underneath here, he might not be too bothered about that stuff. He might not be too bothered about having every single note that's in the original harmony. Remember, Jim doesn't have another harmony instrument to contend with here. He could go anywhere he likes with this. So there's not really any point in over-theorizing things like this, because I think Jim is just following his incredible ear here. In the next bar, we've got that voicing that I showed you earlier for a 13 flat 9, although he's using it over B this time. And then he's going back to the 1 and creating another fourths idea, this time starting on E major, so creating a fourths idea here and going down chromatically. Okay, and here it's really clever actually, because this particular fourths idea ends on an F and the next chord is an F minor. And this particular 4th C approach lends itself nicely to an F minor chord. Okay, let's take a look at the last 10 bars of this section. So it starts off with a nice rising line that kind of is really, it's abandoning the melody. And, you know, kind of it comes back to the melody at the end. It's a really nice way of creating some tension there where he just abandons the melody for a few bars and then lands it back in again. So yeah, really, really super clever. Over the top of the D flat major to the D flat minor 6, we've got, now this is quite tricky. I always think that as soon as you've got the place where you need to be here, look at where you're going to head to, because it's a big stretch to run up and you could quite easily overshoot it. And then just following the melody again. Now it's just playing around with the melody a little bit here, and this is, you know, an encouragement to you to do the same. You know, try not to stick to the same approach that you had the first time. Jim's changing it up each time. And then just a few little chordal ideas that he plays here. Okay, this is really nice what he's doing here. Again, we've seen this earlier when we approach this B diminished. He doesn't always see it as a diminished. Last time he approached it, he saw it just as a minor chord, as a passing between the C and the B flat. And here he's seeing it more as a dominant chord, and he's playing a 13 kind of voicing. And then moving to B flat minor there. So, okay. And then following the melody, nice big jump up there. And then going down to this note, which seems like it's a bit odd, but if we look at the next section, the outro, there's a reason why he's done it. So we come back here to the original approach that he had right at the very top of the piece. Okay, what we've got here is, I'm reliably informed, more of a mambo songo kind of rhythm. The rhythm that he's playing here is not strictly a mambo, it's not strictly a songo, but he's just playing around with it. And Jim's kind of got more of a funkier approach to this, kind of starting off with Okay. Now, I haven't been too overzealous with the way I've transcribed this. I've just given you the general kind of gist of what he's doing, and I really want to encourage you to try and just improvise yourself over the top of the backing track that you've got, using some of the ideas that he's using. But the general rhythm that he's using is what's called a mambo rhythm. And this is an example of a strict mambo rhythm. And so he's varying that rhythm a little bit, but you can hear the underlying idea. Jim is a big fan of this style of music, and there's a plethora of albums where he explores Brazilian music and other Latin forms of music as well. There's a really interesting thing that happens where he's using that idea of displacement again, which happens on the 9 bars into this section. All he's doing here is he's grouping loosely in figures of dotted crotchets, so 3/8 notes. And he's extending that across multiple bars, creating tension. We've talked before about the importance of not only creating melodic and harmonic tension, but also creating rhythmic tension. Now, he slots back into more of a traditional mambo rhythm after that little kind of displacement section. And then we end the whole piece with these chords, which is a B flat over a C, or a C11. And then he ends on a C minor 9, which is really interesting. And he's got this really nice run down whilst he's still holding the bar there. And then just the bar over the 8th fret, creating more of a fourth C sound, and then just a nice up strum. I wouldn't worry too much about kind of really kind of trying to nail exactly how Jim comes off of it. It's very loose at the end. So that's the final head. So some things to take away from this whole series. One would be to kind of explore more Latin music so that you can understand why Jim's picked that particular intro and outro. A couple of other things to think about would be rhythmic tension. And this is where he creates some displacement by, instead of grouping in even groupings in 2s, 4s, 6, 8s or whatever, he's grouping in odd numbers, so 3, 5s, 7s, 9s. Another thing to think about in the approach to this tune is to think more kind of macro than micro. So we saw some really interesting areas where you've got a 2-5, which is very quick succession, he actually just treats it as either a 2 or just the 5, rather than trying to worry too much about getting all of the information for the 2 and the 5 all within one bar, especially when you're playing at tempos that are this particularly quick. And then the final thing that I think you should consider, which is really different to how I've heard other guitarists approach this particular tune, is the use of pivot notes. And we saw that in the third episode, I believe, where we had the pivot notes over the top of the first A section and the B section, and he was just moving chords around underneath it. And that was such an interesting way of approaching that. And there were places where he abandoned all theoretical concepts and just followed his ear. And I think that is a really good thing and something that you can take away from this. If you want to find the backing track and the full transcriptions and all of the exercises that you see in this video, then head over to the Patreon channel, which is here. Happy practicing, and I'll be back in a few weeks where we'll be exploring Kenny Burrell's My Favorite Things. So have a good time practicing, and I'll see you next time. Bye.